What is a cell membrane? A cell membrane is a semi-permeable biological membrane that forms the outer boundary of all living cells. It separates the cell's internal from the external surroundings. It acts like a barrier and gatekeeper that protects cell's contents and controls what enters and exits the cell, while supporting the structure. This video will guide you through the process of how substances are transported and how structures are crucial in the cell membrane. By the end of the video, you will see how every piece of the cell membrane works together. Now you might be thinking, what are those weird looking figures? Those are phospholipids. Phospholipids are lipid molecules that form the structural foundation of the cell membrane, with the hydrophilic head and hydrophobic tails. Hydrophilic head loves water because it has high electric charge within the phosphate group. Therefore, it is a polar head. Hydrophobic tails, however, fears water. Hydrophobic tails contain fatty acid and is nonpolar, making them water insoluble. These phospholipid forms two rows facing each other. They are called bilayer. If the temperature drops, the phospholipids will become packed, losing its flexibility and becomes less fluid. This is when cholesterol comes in. Cholesterol helps not only to keep the phospholipids from becoming too packed, but also helps stabilize membrane during high temperature and help with what can pass through the membrane. Now that we know what is a phospholipid bilayer, let's talk how different molecules transport through the membrane and the function of the proteins. There are two types of proteins, peripheral proteins and integral proteins. Receptor protein is a peripheral protein. They have various functions such as acting as an enzyme and attaching cytoskeleton structures. It is loosely attached to the outer and inner surface of the cell. There it is. It detects specific signals from the outside cell, things like hormones or other chemical messengers. When the signal binds to the receptor, it changes shape and triggers a response inside the cell. A microprotein is an integral membrane protein that acts as the cell's ID tag, so other cells can recognize it. Both proteins have carbohydrates. If a carbohydrate is attached to a lipid, it is called a glycolipid. If a carbohydrate is attached to a protein, it is called glycoprotein. Glycolipids and glycoproteins act as a marker protein because their carbohydrate chains stick out of the membrane and identify the cell to the other cells. Now, these are channel proteins. Channel proteins are integral membrane proteins that facilitates the transport of smaller ions and molecules across the membrane. As for the carrier proteins, they move molecules by changing the shape, while protein pumps are carriers that use ATP to push substances against their gradient. Passive transport is the movement of substances across a cell membrane from high to low concentration without the use of cellular energy. Simple diffusion and facilitated diffusion are examples of passive transports. Simple diffusion travels through the membrane without worry because it only occurs between small polar molecules such as water and oxygen. They move with the flow, moving with the concentration gradient from high to low. However, the facilitated diffusion transport big and polar molecules through the membrane proteins. Like simple diffusion, they move from high to low concentration, following the concentration gradient. Their role is to help big and polar molecules travel through the membrane. Active transport is the opposite from passive transport. Instead of moving substances with the concentration gradient, it goes against the concentration gradient, going from low to high concentration. This requires energy. Active transport uses energy from ATP during this process. It relies on transport proteins that change shape to push molecules across the membrane. Cells use active transport when they need to bring in nutrients that are in lower concentration outside, or when large molecules can't cross the membrane on their own. What happens if there are bigger molecules that cannot fit through the protein transports? This is when endocytosis and exocytosis are important in the cell membrane. Endocytosis helps big molecules pass through the membrane, such as bacteria and nutrients. How does this happen? The membrane folds inward, traps the material, and pinches off to create a little bubble, a vesicle, inside the cell. Phagocytosis is a type of endocytosis that eats large particles such as dead cells or food particles. Pinocytosis uptakes fluid only. Exocytosis is when a cell uses energy to move large particles out of the cell by fusing a vesicle with the cell membrane and releasing its contents. This includes disposing waste and secreting important molecules. Example, a plant releases carbohydrates to build itself a cell wall. Well, that brings us to the end of the video. I hope you not only enjoyed watching this video, but also finally understand the roles and function of how the structure and transportation in the cell membrane works together. This balance keeps the cell's internal environment stable, balanced, and suitable for life. Thank you for watching. Until next time.